If I were to try it myself, I think I would want to start with something that's very light. Try to do more of like that beer and pretzels game. And if it transforms into something larger, great. We have a Discord discussions. I can actually classify this as a Discord discussion because we talked about this on the live show, and I thought that we would discuss it a little bit further here on the main show. James and James 2.0 and Adam were discussing on the live show the idea of the difference between the epic RPG version of TTRPGs and the beer and pretzels game, and how those two are very different. And it was around a conversation talking about new players and the experience that they expect. We were discussing at that point the influence of things like Critical Role and, Dimension 20 and all of these shows that, new players might have gotten introduced to, and that there might be a certain expectation of what you think the game is going to be when you start playing. What do you think realistic expectations for players should be when they start for the first time playing an RPG, a Dungeons & Dragons?
I think that varies from player to player, but I think that's what a session 0 is for.
Session 0, for those who are not aware, is basically a session where you're not playing the game, but you are going over what the game is going to be and discussing basically the parameters that everybody is going to be working inside of. Worth noting that that's something you're probably going to have to do. There may be an expectation among new players that are just playing for the first time that anyone running the game is going to just be Matt Mercer. And I need to make something very clear. There's only one Matt Mercer. Nobody else is going to do it the same way. There's only one Brennan Lee Mulligan. There's not going to be the same experience when somebody else is running the game. Everybody runs a game differently. All your players are also different. And the group that you play with is always going to be different. I had made the comment that once I saw a thing where someone said, "Why can't you be more like Matt Mercer?" And the DM was like, "Why can't you be like Laura Bailey?" The players are always going to be different, and you have to manage expectations a little bit when you start in. And it's not going to be professional actors in a soundstage, with writers that are able to script out the stories and cameramen and all that. You might be sitting down and playing a pretty casual, nonchalant version of the game, which kind of goes into that whole beer and pretzels game that Datum was discussing.
Kind of. One of the things, the big difference between watching, say, Critical Role or any, live stream, first of all, you're not doing a performance when you're playing just an RPG with friends. Typically, you're not doing it for cameras, you're not doing it for a podcast, if you're doing that.
That's true.
So it's going to be a lot less refined,
Sure.
And there will be a lot of out of character and out of action banter between players and characters and stuff. There's a lot of times, like you've played with me a few times, where it's just like,
Sure.
in older games I've played, it's like a lot of it is game, but then it's like something goes on, maybe you get snacks, you just have a sit down, kind of talk about something else for 10 minutes because it comes up and you guys just want to chat about it because you're all friends, hopefully. Yep. If you're playing a game. You don't see that side of gaming typically on those more produced live streams or shows.
Sure.
Because I feel like if you took the 10 minutes out of game to talk, like the players just talking with each other, it becomes a less refined piece, and it's less like a show and more like, oh, this is just what happens. And, I feel like that's not a side you see as well. You can't expect to be in the game the entire time.
I will clarify one thing, though. I only play with enemies. I only play with my enemy. That's like a rule. I do fall into this pattern, though, that even if I'm not playing for camera, I do have a tendency to act like there's a camera. Like, for RPGs, it does feel like a performance, even if I'm not performing for anybody. for me. But you probably
That
already
sounds like
know
a
that.
personal problem.
RPG,
Itis.
itis, yeah. I have RPG-itis. It's like arthritis, but it's RPG-itis. I do have a tendency to think of it as a performance, but I am fully aware that I am not going to be at a level of people that do live plays.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. There was that one time that I did do live plays. And when I do that, I do try to up my game just a little bit, but
Oh, good. Just more extra, it's fine.
just more extra as you can possibly be. There is a certain thing where I will perform characters that are extra by their very nature so that I can go bigger. I'm not good at subtle, so...
Yeah, you played a ninja turtle that was glow in the dark.
Yeah, I did. I played an aging rockstar bard, and I played a rainbow unicorn detective. So yes,
I feel like you should try something subtle sometime.
I have ideas for subtle characters. I do. At some point, maybe I'll play. At some point, maybe I'll get to play Vaughn. Vaughn is more of a subtle character. So, but I would have to be in an actual campaign that lasts for a while in order to actually play Vaughn. I just think that there is a certain case to be made for managing expectations of new players if they have only seen the performances themselves on podcast or on streaming, that you're probably not necessarily going to have that. One of the things I thought was interesting was when Datum was talking about when he was younger, he was looking for that epic RPG, and as he gets older, he kind of ends up wanting the basic beer and pretzels game that isn't taken so seriously, and you just kind of mess around in the game world. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I do think that there has gotten to be a point where everybody thinks that the epic RPG is the end-all be-all of TTRPG storytelling. And it's amazing when it happens. It's great when you can tell those stories. But there really is something wonderful and fun and cathartic about being able to play the not serious game where you're not having an epic storyline or even a cohesive storyline, and you're just messing around in a game, playing these fun characters and having a blast, not worried about like the end, the fate of the universe or anything.
Well, the trick there is if you want to do both, you still can.
Yeah.
You can do your epic RPG and then intersperse between periods of huge action, perhaps. Between them, you have like side stories. Anime does this all the time. There are filler episodes. They don't really do anything for the overall plot, but they're there to break tension.
Right.
They're there to be silly or weird or cute or just like add some story to it, but not be part of the overall arcing story.
Sure.
And so, like, one of the things when I played with David the last time was we had this huge overall story, and then we had like a one-shot in there. And it still was part of that story, but it was a different set of characters doing a different thing, and it just was a lull in that story to do something else. The other thing I like...
Mirrorstone?
Yeah, that was that one.
Yeah.
And what I have thought of doing before with a different game was actually just doing mission-based.
Oh, sure.
I may have mentioned it before. It was for Death Watch, I think.
Oh.
It might have been. But the idea was that I will, here's a bunch of different missions, and each session that we'd play would be a specific, like, this is a mission at a location, and then it's pretty much that session, and maybe the next session would take place over that mission, and then you'd break up, come back, you'd have downtime between those missions, and then go on another mission. Mm-hmm. Because then you can have a story here, a story there. They don't necessarily have to be interconnected.
Sure.
But they could have a similar theme, or your characters could want to do them for different reasons. So kind of like in a video game, where you might go, cool, I've got this quest here, this quest there, that quest there. You could compartmentalize them so that you could just kind of do like, hey, we're going to do one quest in one session. Next session, a different quest, and you could just do those as part of either an overall story or just kind of like a hub world almost.
We actually talked a little bit about that on the live episode too, which is the idea of just building your setting and then kind of letting things flow out of that. Do you see something of like a mission board that you could go to? Like hero for hire sort of
You could, if
framework?
the setting is one that would have something like that, like a D&D fantasy type setting, or you could have like a computer that has missions listed on it if you have a sci-fi or something modern.
Certainly.
And in case of what I was doing, you were going to be Space Marines, so you basically would have just missions that were available to go on, or missions that you were dictated to go on.
Okay, yeah, because I'm starting to think of like more the Witcher framework, because you're a monster hunter, you take on missions in order to,
you could do that kind of thing too.
Yeah, I do like the idea of doing it as a space mission, because that kind of reminds me of like the Warhammer Inquisitor, I want to say.
Yeah.
Martyr,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
You get to kind of like choose missions on that. Go.
That one's very much just pick a mission, go on it, do the thing, come back.
Yeah.
Pick a mission, go on it, come back.
If I were to try it myself, I think I would want to start with something that's very light. Tried to do more of like that beer and pretzels game, and if it transforms into something larger, great, but you're under no obligation to do that. You at least establish some kind of tone by starting off fairly straightforward. Even when I did like Rift Hunters, I kind of imagined the first few missions that they were going to be going on as not particularly central to any larger world-ending event. Even though I imagined that there was, I didn't imagine those first few campaigns were going to be that.
Yeah, and something else to remember as well is that not every campaign or game you're going to play needs to feature end-of-the-world scenarios.
No, everything doesn't have to have a giant blue beam in the sky.
But it can. Orbital lasers, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. You can get them at Blue Beams or Us. Whenever I play a video game and you see the giant like blue sky beam or something that's in, it's like, oh, sky beam. Yep, this is the world-ending scenario. You automatically know. You don't need. I
think if you'd really like to have fun with a group sometime, what you can do for one campaign is they end up releasing or creating this world-ending threat.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that kills them.
Yes.
Or something along the lines. Maybe they release this ancient evil, and at the end of the campaign, that's what happens. That's the end of their campaign, and the characters all die. Maybe one survives or something. Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
Depends how all shakes out in the end.
Yeah.
But then you have your next campaign trying to then destroy this evil or combat this end of the world scenario or something like that. If you want to go with epic, do that. That would be fun, because Group A has set this in motion. Group B has to take this problem and solve it.
Right. So what you do is your first group is the beer and pretzels game that's just screwing around in the world and ends up releasing the big evil thing. We were messing around and we broke the game world. And then your next campaign is the epic RPG, where you have to fix what the people in the beer and pretzels game did when they screwed around.
Yeah. You ever watch Adventure Time?
I watched some of Adventure Time, yes.
It's the idea that Finn accidentally released the Lich and then has to go kill the Lich.
Yeah. Be Finn, but also be Finn.
But also have Jake.
Make sure you have Jake. If you don't have Jake, you don't really have anything. Sorry.
Just a sword.
You just have a sword, but hey, that's
missing
something.
Arm.
Do you like to play something that has a larger overarching, like more of an epic thematic campaign, or do you want to play something that has more of a lighthearted, not so serious kind of vibe to it?
It really depends. David spoiled me the last time I actually got to be a solid player in a campaign.
Yes.
With a somewhat serious overall campaign.
Sure.
And it wasn't that... There wasn't a lack of humor or anything. The humor that was there and the enjoyment from that type of thing came from our interactions as players with the world and the story that was being told.
Mm-hmm.
More than just a lulz haha game.
Sure.
But I don't mind lighthearted games either. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom and serious, but I
Right.
do like a game that is not just lol.
Right. I like to play in games where it does feel like you're moving towards some sort of a goal, like there's something larger going on that you have to be aware of, but not necessarily a super serious or like the stakes have never been higher sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I do find that playing in the one shots, it doesn't really matter what happens, can be a lot of fun, but I do find myself always yearning for something that's a longer campaign that I can play in, that feels like I actually get to develop my character, that I actually get to experience things over a longer period of time. But I don't necessarily think it has to be an epic RPG, and I don't really expect it ever to feel like it's literally Critical Role or something like that. I know that is not my echelon, so I wouldn't expect that from other people I'm playing with or people that are running the game. So I think it's just about managing expectations. There's a lot of new players that probably only started D&D when the 5e came out, when all of the shows and the media attention on it and the movies and everything started to release, and who probably are not aware of what the typical experience has been for people for, 50 years prior, the 40 years or so beforehand.
The TLDR is go into a game knowing what your group expects and what they want to get out of the game.
Yeah.
And hopefully find a group that meshes well with what you are hoping for, or just a DM who's willing to teach you if you've never played, or a GM who's willing to teach you.
Yeah, if you end up with somebody running the game that doesn't have any interest in teaching you the game, it's probably not the best place for you to start. You probably want to go someplace where it's more of a teaching game, and sometimes you will see specifically people running games that do it in the spirit of, I'm going to teach new players, and will make that known. But yeah, manage expectations. Understand that no, it's not necessarily going to be what you saw on the TV or on the YouTube or whatever. But that's okay, because there's still a lot of possibility that you're going to have fun, you're going to get a lot out of the experience, but you kind of have to have an open mind when you go into it. With that being said, I'm wondering what other people's experiences are and what you prefer to have. We'll continue the discussion. How serious, how epic, how small or personal do you like to have your RPG stories, and what's the best example that you've had from your personal experience? Let us know in the comments down below.